we're live now.
Okay, excellent. So this is the Senate GovOps Committee. We're back. We're doing things a little out of order because we're trying to vote bills out and we're losing some committee members who have to leave early. So we are now looking at H-291, that bill related to the Cybersecurity Advisory Council. So we have Becky Wasserman with us to walk us through the changes that we discussed yesterday. You should have a new draft, draft 1.3.
Right.
Okay.
1.3.
All right, so why don't you go through that?
Sure. Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. In this draft 1.3, I've highlighted the changes from the version you saw yesterday. So I'll start in section 1 in the definition section of chapter 208, which creates a cybersecurity chapter. I made a change to the definition of essential supply chain on page 2 to include articles that are critical to the state's heating system and fuels. The committee had also discussed having the council make recommendations on additional articles that could fall under this definition. And I've addressed that later on in the bill, so I'll point you to that when I get there. In section 4662 in the membership in subsection B, I removed the 2 legislative members, the House and Senate member. Line 15, the representative that is appointed by the Commissioner of Public Service was changed to a representative from a distribution or transmission utility.
And that is the language, just by the way, that the person who was representing electric and gas utilities yesterday suggested.
Yes.
That language.
And in subdivision 4, the representative from the state municipal water system, which will be appointed by the Secretary of Natural Resources. On line 19 in subdivision 5, I removed the extra organization that was inadvertently left over in that line. And then under powers and duties on page 3 in subsection C, so that starts on line 9, I removed the previous subdivision 2, which dealt with reviewing and approving the cybersecurity standards, and that's because that is no longer in this bill. And then the rest of the subdivisions are renumbered. On the top of page 4, subdivision 5, I added in protocols to this subdivision. So the council will be conducting an inventory and review of cybersecurity standards and protocols for critical sector infrastructures and make recommendations on whether improved or additional standards and protocols are necessary. In subdivision 6, so the council is identifying and advising on a number of opportunities. In subdivision G on line 17, they will be investigating ways the state can implement a unified cybersecurity communications and response, including recommendations for establishing statewide communication protocols in the event of a cybersecurity incident. And then I attempted to fix subdivision H, which I realized had the wrong verb for the lead-in of the subdivision. So it said relating to cyber insurance, which didn't fit with advise and the opportunity. So I don't know if access is the right word here, but I thought this subdivision was getting at how to have more access for cyber insurance, including how to increase in availability and affordability of cyber insurance. It might be that another verb is more appropriate, so not sure the intent of the committee there.
Yeah, the Secretary Naylor emailed me and said that he thought it should be assess cyber insurance, including how to access. That doesn't make sense either, I don't think. I don't think assess is the right word. Access might be how to access cyber insurance, including how to increase availability and affordability of cyber insurance for critical industries.
I think your
assessing the overall system, and then the inclusionary factors are how to increase availability and affordability.
So you think assess is the
I think
right word?
assess makes more sense than access.
Or top of page 5, that, the highlighted paragraph 8.
So the lead in language says identify and advise on opportunities. So to assess. seems-
Yeah, that's what I was going back to, is that
Yeah.
lead in language.
This says access.
It does.
I know, that's, we're trying to decide whether access or assess is better, or if there's some other word. Senator Watson?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth about this. Where I'm at right now is I think it's access makes more sense because it's advise on opportunities to access this as opposed, like, do we really need more opportunities to assess? If it was just do this.
You're trying to get access to it. You want to get it.
Exactly.
But why
How do
not
we get
directing them
verb?
to
Can we just
access
do-
it?
No, but it's identify and advise
Cybersecurity-
on opportunities to access it.
It could be provide, to be consistent with some of the other ones.
Provide.
Provide is a good generic word,
Okay,
but they're not gonna provide. it.
Exactly.
No,
they're not
right,
gonna
that's
provide. I was like, no,
right.
I like that even less.
So,
review.
What's the operative launch to that sentence? Identify and advise an opportunity to purchase cyber, to purchase it, or
Review.
Identify and advise opportunities to.
Consider.
Okay, no,
Purchase.
I guess I'm back on access does make the most sense.
including how to increase availability and affordability.
Bob.
I think access
I
is
think
fine.
access is fine.
access
too.
is fine, you're
I
okay
think
with it?
so.
Ann,
Yes. Senator
Bob,
How'd you do that?
Senator Norris?
Whatever,
Access is
Can we
fine?
get the English professor in here to
they both have
advise?
different meanings, whatever meaning you're looking for is fine. Mike.
Senator White, you're okay with access?
Beautiful.
All right, Secretary Naylor, sorry, we're going with access if you're listening.
He suggested
He suggested assess, but I don't think that makes sense. so.
It's not with the lead in language, you
Yeah.
identify and advise on opportunities to access. Yeah, no, I think it's success.
Yeah.
All right,
We have to go back
good
to it.
job, Becky. It just took us a long time to get there, but we did it.
Let me know if it changes, but we'll.
All right,
Okay, so then the next change is in subsection F in the meetings. Provision for this council on page 5, starting on line 11. I added in language about the council being authorized to enter into an executive session in addition to what is provided in the open meeting law. So there are some types of business or things to consider that a public body can go into executive session for. I tried to think of other reasons why this council, like, that didn't fit under what is already enumerated in the law and would apply to this council as to why they would need to be in executive session. So I added in here testimony from a person regarding a cybersecurity incident or response to that incident, or any evaluations, recommendations, or discussions of cybersecurity standards, protocols, and incident responses, the disclosure of which would jeopardize public safety.
You had mentioned talking to Tucker Anderson about this section.
I did talk to Tucker about this as well as the next section on the Public Records Act.
the one thing I had, and just thinking about it right now, that the Romanet I, is that right? Romanet I. We had testimony the other day about, from a person regarding a cybersecurity incident or response to that incident. And we didn't go into executive session, and it was, the person was careful to not reveal anything that was sensitive.
Right.
And we didn't ask. I think one time we asked a question that he wasn't quite comfortable answering online. But I wouldn't want, this seemed, maybe testimony from yes, and putting like sensitive, or that might reveal sensitive,
I
have
could
some
use
kind of,
the same language that's in
which would jeopardize public safety.
this disclosure of which would jeopardize public safety.
Yeah, I think that might be helpful, because
Okay,
I think it was helpful to have that testimony public, because then it sort of gave everybody an idea of what we're talking about without being revealing too much. Senator Hosky?
I wonder, and I like the adding of the disclosure of which would jeopardize public safety, but I also wonder if adding in, so it would read something like testimony from a person regarding sensitive details of a cybersecurity incident or response to that incident that would jeopardize public safety.
Where would you add details?
So from a person regarding sensitive details of A, so on line 16 after the word regarding.
Okay, sensitive details, because if you talk about it more generically.
Then it's fine, and that way it sort of narrows it, and then also adding that the disclosure which would jeopardize public safety, that way it sort of really gets at that narrowness.
Yep. Is sensitive an okay word to use in that situation, Becky? Sensitive or just details of a site?
That would be fine too.
Yeah, maybe just details.
I was just sort of trying to get at
Regarding
like,
details of a cybersecurity incident or response to that incident, the disclosure of which would jeopardize public safety.
I feel much
Okay.
better about that.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure if there's any other type of discussion that would need to be covered. I tried to see.
I think that covers it. And
And there are other ones under the law right now that could apply, but it wasn't as, it's not, so there's one about a clear and imminent peril to the public safety. So that could relate to cybersecurity as well. But this was just more specific to cybersecurity.
yeah, I think that makes sense.
And then on the top of page 6, I added that members of the council and persons invited to testify before the council shall not disclose to the public information, records, discussions, and opinions stated in connection to the council's work.
That might be a little too broad too, now that I'm thinking of it.
oh, the Public Records Act exemption.
Yeah,
So this is for open meeting law.
Do we want?
maybe
As
we.
I believe she named the other. one.
Oh, I was like,
Archives on
here.
it?
I know, but we did.
We did, didn't
Becky
we?
talked with
Yeah.
Tucker about it, so, I think maybe including that phrase too here as well, that the disclosure of which would jeopardize public safety. So, because we would want them to be able to
Yes.
talk about the work.
Yes,
Um,
I think that's a key phrase.
and I think communication is one of the things that this council is supposed to be doing,
Yeah,
so.
but I think the language you just used would be great to include.
Okay, so I changed it to members of the council and persons invited to testify before the council should not disclose to the public information, records, discussions, and opinions stated in connection to the council's work if the disclosure would jeopardize public safety.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Is that, yeah?
I'm just trying to think of how this works. So how is this different than regular executive session?
I mean, it would be confident, if you're in executive session, it would be confidential, but I think this is probably more getting at the people that are coming in to testify, if they're talking about something and there's, the council is discussing an incident that, someone learns about something about an incident, but they wouldn't be sharing that outside of executive session.
Does that sound?
Yeah, I was just thinking about how regular executive sessions work and just the understanding that you don't share things that
Right,
you talk
and
about.
You could not include this as well, and just,
I think it's probably an extra, it's better to just say it in addition, but
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably isn't necessarily necessary, but I don't know. If you're
Yeah.
going to be extra careful in one way or the other,
yeah, and I think I'm bringing it up just to talk through, like, was there something very different about it from the way I had already understood executive
Right.
sessions to work? And it sounds like it's not so different. But that's okay.
Okay. Senator Bielski?
Okay. Question and then maybe a thought, depending on the answer to the question. In typical executive session, and I ask because I've not served at the municipal level, are people from the public invited in to testify?
They can be.
You
Okay.
can only come in if you're invited to be there.
And there's an expectation that those invitees do not share what happened in executive session.
You know, I don't actually, we never actually talked about.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the executive session law, and it says attendance in executive session shall be limited to members of the public body and in the discretion of the public body, its staff, clerical assistants, and legal counsel on persons who are subjects of the discussion or whose information is needed.
And they're all bound by that confidentiality. Because so what I'm gonna, so like, I would expect, here's my thought. I would expect members of the council, or if we're talking about a board or town clerks, to know that executive session is not to be shared. But a member of the public invited to come in and speak may not know that.
Right.
And so I guess for me, it's sort of like, how do we ensure that that information is given to the member of the public that is invited in and then acknowledged in some way? I mean, I almost like feel like there should be some sort of like confidentiality agreement that they sign.
Well, I think that the council can figure that out. I don't know if we need to be that directive, but having this in here would give them the authority to say, oh, well, we want to make sure you understand that if we go into executive session, you can't share what we talked about, kind of thing.
I think that's the goal of why these
Yeah.
extra languages.
Yeah. Senator White?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So when I was on our select board, we read out a motion before we went to executive session that outlined, there was some standard thing
Yeah.
that we read that was like, it was executive session where members of the public, blah, 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 and we will not be discussing we will not be making decisions in executive session. We will only be discussing facts, blah, blah, blah,
Two
you know.
kinds.
Yeah.
They find that premature knowledge of something would be, would put the public at it, or put us
Yes.
at a disadvantage,
Yes,
and, or to, discuss
like a staff.
officer, yeah.
Yeah.
Personnel.
So we had to read something out loud. I
Mhm.
bet if I were on this organization, I would suggest having a statement in the motion when they go into executive session.
So they would have to have a motion to go into executive session that would be using one of the enumerated reasons under statute or what is provided, this additional language provided in the bill that speaks to hearing testimony about an incident or one of they're talking about like a cybersecurity standard or protocol. So they would have to state their reason for entering.
So we don't even need to hope that they do, they have to.
Okay, so let's just add the jeopardized language on this one too. Is everything okay?
I might need to step out. How soon are we gonna vote on this?
We're gonna try to vote on it before 3:00 because
Perfect.
Senator Morris has to leave as well,
I
so.
will hold up.
Okay. All right, so then there's the actual public records exemption
Right,
in paragraph
yes, so that's
H.
paragraph H, so it says any records or information produced or acquired by the council. And here's where I think a decision is made by the committee. I made this very broad, so I said in conducting the work described in subsection C, which is all of their powers and duties, shall be kept confidential and exempt from public inspection or copying under the Public Records Act. And I also made this exemption not subject to the repeal in 5 years.
Yeah, I think this is too broad.
Yes, I have a note. This is-
Yeah, because I think that some of their work we do actually really want to be public because it's like, how do these industries react? So.
And I started off broad, just to.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, the coverage.
So then maybe we say, maybe it's under the stuff discussed under paragraph 3A, the things in which they go into.
So regarding cybersecurity standards, protocols, and incident responses?
No, because we want them to talk about standards, protocols, and incidents responses publicly. It's just anything over, maybe it's anything that is, we add that phrase again, the sense, the details of which are disclosure of which would jeopardize public safety. And just have it narrow to that. And Senator, did you have an idea?
Yes, I do. What if? And we could do it that way. We could also reference the 3 areas where we've said that they could be done in executive session and say that that Romanet 1, anything created or produced in Romanet 1, 2, or subsection B of this section shall be exempt from public records.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, but it's by saying 3A, but maybe that was,
That might work too.
yeah, 3A.
Yeah,
or
you're
B.
right. Yeah, 3A or
3A and B.
B, yeah.
Senator, go ahead.
Oh,
Becky.
sorry, I thought you just said you wanted them to publicly talk about standards and protocols.
Well, if they had to go into executive session to talk about it, then because it would jeopardize public safety, then we would want that exempt from public records. But if they're just talking generically about the protocols, like, oh, if, then we would want that public. I don't know, Senator Watson?
Yeah, just the verb that you used there, Tanya, was produced in or something.
Mhm.
And I like the language of, that would jeopardize public safety. I think that's the key, but I don't think that it should necessarily apply just to things that came out of executive session, because what if somebody just emails them details and it was never in an executive session? It's still sensitive, it still would put somebody at risk, or public at risk. So I guess I'm thinking about like that phrase, I think still applies regardless of where it comes from. Unless, but then someone's got to decide, we think, we think this record is, if we disclose it would put the public at risk. I don't think that's really different than, other people who have to deal with FOIA requests having to make decisions like this is a personnel record, other things that are, and if it gets challenged, then somebody else can look at it, I assume it would follow that normal process.
Right, and so it might be better not to cross-reference, but to just say,
Yeah.
any records or information produced or acquired by the council regarding cybersecurity standards, protocols, and incident responses, if the disclosure would jeopardize public safety, shall be kept confidential and shall be exempt.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Okay. And then the exemption from repeal is fine, because this whole thing sunsets in 2028 anyway. Unless
But records are forever.
right, true.
Unless they're
Well,
scheduled to be destroyed.
Yes,
Oh.
Once they've been digitized, though, they are forever. Well, the internet is forever.
We will
Cockroaches are forever.
Okay,
all right.
And Bob has 2 minutes.
Yeah, we gotta get going, so. The
And bye-bye.
heating fuels and systems are added into critical infrastructure, on
Yes,
page
and
7.
the subsection above that, in I removed the per diem compensation and reimbursement for the legislative members, since they're no longer on the committee.
Okay,
And then in section 3, this section is dealing with the definition of essential supply chain. So for the annual report, the first one that's due on January 15th, 2024, the council is directed to include in that report recommendations on whether to amend the definition of essential supply chain as defined in 20 VSA 4661 to include additional supply chains.
okay, because this was define it by rule, but they don't have rulemaking authority, and Becky was concerned about just having that as part of the definition, so Senator Watson.
It's a small change, but instead of heating fuels and systems, wondering if we can make it thermal fuels and systems, because that would cover cooling, which may become increasingly critical.
Okay, thermal fuels.
Dang,
Just
good
thinking out loud.
catch.
So if I make that change, I will also make it above
Yep.
in the definition of essential.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
That's why we pay you.
That's why we
to
have
Senator Watson.
You guys on the committee,
Yeah,
Don't
details.
you know, thermal.
Yeah.
Okay, Becky, we'll give you a couple minutes to make those changes, and then, so why don't we go off live